Hey, what's up? This is Mia, and today we are going to do an update on the homestead. So, let's begin. Okay, you guys, so it is the end of our first official season of running the homestead. What I plan on talking to you guys about is pretty much the lessons learned in our plans for the season. For those that are new, let me tell you the 4 sections. We have our fruit guild, where we have our fruit trees and everything. We have our vegetable area where we do all our gardening. We have our pollinator garden, and we also have our landscaping in the front. So our DIY landscaping. Also, just for a heads up, during the fall, since I don't do gardening all year round, since this is my first year, I'm just literally doing the summer and the spring. I would have loved to do a fall garden, but I want to go back and do a lot of planning and a lot of revamping of my plans from this year, or my lessons learned from this year. So once this fall hits and winter hits, you guys, we're going back in the house. Now, if you've seen some older videos, I love working in furniture, and I love interior design, and I love designing my home to make it more Afro-Bohemian. So we're going to go back in the house, and you guys are going to see some more DIY projects. With that being said, let's go over the first section, the vegetable garden. During our summer, we had a crazy amount of thunderstorms. One of the big things that it taught me was when it rains like that, plants love rainwater, and they will respond appropriately. And what I wasn't banking on was for a lot of my plants to grow ridiculously. So like, for instance, my tomatoes did so well. Like, they got like 6 to 7 feet tall. The bad part is I didn't really have a trellis to brace them. So in response, they grew over into garden beds, and they drowned out a lot of my other plants, like my green pepper plants, my jalapeno plants. So I wasn't able to really take care of my plants. I wasn't able to get like green peppers and jalapenos as much as I would like, because the tomatoes literally took it over. Now, what I learned from that is next year, the tomatoes are going to have their own section, and they're going to have their own trellis. And if I want to put anything else in there, it has to be something that's not afraid to be around them. So like, for instance, my basil did really well around my tomatoes, because the basil was like, yeah, whatever, I'm gonna grow where I want to grow, you grow where you want to grow, respect my space. Another thing that I learned with the garden bed is that depending on how much rain it is, it can bring a lot of insects. Since it rained so much over here, it brought a lot of cabbage worms. So a lot of my cabbage, kale, collards, they were eaten before we can get out here, because all that rain just brought them, and they just took over and ate. So it was pretty much, this year I just chucked it off as a buffet for the squirrels and the worms, because I've seen tons of squirrels run into my garden, take my tomatoes, and run off. So, and I couldn't stop them. I just didn't feel like stopping them. I was like, enjoy. There's some salt and pepper in the house if you need it. Just let me know. Now, this is a general lesson learned. When it rains and it storms, yeah, weeds will come back with a vengeance. Man, we have had so many weeds back here. Or I wouldn't even say weeds is really a plant that you don't want. That's why I say weeds. But we had so much grass and weeds grow through these wood chips. Oh my gosh, it was crazy. Like, it got past our hips. We had to literally come out here with a lawnmower and just start chopping, dropping. That's pretty much how intense it was. Now, the good thing is, we saw our plants really grow to their fullest potential, at least out here in this condition. So I was very, very excited about that. I learned the value of organizing, and also really getting a grip on what you planted and labeling what you planted. There were so many plants that I put in a section and just walked away from, and it wasn't until like later in the season that I started realizing, oh crap, I forgot I planted that there, but what is that? I don't know, but I planted it, so I know what it is, but I don't know what it is. It was just too much of emotions. I'm going to take pictures and take a mental note and write down what I planted this year, so that next year I could put like a little stick or tag somewhere where I know, hey, don't put your cabbage over here because you have Joe Pye weed growing in this area, and the Joe Pye weed is going to definitely take over the plants. So don't do that. What are we going to do different next year in the vegetable area? Well, one of the big things that I want to do is really go through and organize and really get an understanding of what is where and what goes best where. So we're going to clear out. I wanted to do a fall season, a fall garden, but it was just so much going on, and I actually want to take in and really review and understand what we could have done this year. So I'm going to plan on doing that next year. What we're going to do now, we're going to actually literally clean out all the boxes, throw all the weeds in the compost bins, or just leave them and rip off the roots, leave them in the garden bed. Take a bunch of compost and fill all the beds up, because over winter time it's going to break down. Because as you can tell, let me see if I can turn that up, we're under a ton of trees. So really, me adding compost is an option, because the soil gets so good under these trees because all the leaves fall and they break down by next year that we really just add compost as an option. So that's what we plan on doing. But the overall, a lot of plants did really good. Our plums grew. We had about 2 or 3 plums because that's in the vegetable garden area. But it's a lesson learned. So next year we're going to do a lot better, and it's going to be a lot of planting during this winter and a lot of buying seeds. So let's move over to our pollinator garden. So one of the big things that I learned over in the pollinator garden was that a lot of my tall plants were taking over a lot of my low growing plants. So for instance, my canna lilies, we moved some canna lilies from the front because canna lilies, if you put canna lilies in a certain space, just be prepared. They will grow and they will spread. Lessons learned from the pollinator garden: make sure your plants aren't invasive. If you're going to do that, don't plant invasive plants and expect for them to to respect your space, because they're not. They're just going to grow. That was our pollinator garden area. Let's move over to the fruit tree guild. Now our fruit tree guild actually did pretty well for the first year. One of the big things was insects. So like in our area over here, this is where I did a lot of my squash, my zucchini, my pumpkins, my Brussels sprouts, corn. I can honestly tell you that all my zucchini and squash did not survive. Like we had a really bad case of squash beetles this year. And when I tell you they came in, even though I planted like companion plants and really put a lot of plants in there to try to prevent them, the squash beetles came in and just ate everything alive. So I didn't get any zucchini, I didn't get no pumpkins, no squash, no nothing. They just ate it all. So we ended up running a lawnmower through it and just cutting it all down. Lessons learned is I'm going to try to set my zucchini and squash up a little higher next year, or we're going to put more wood chips around it. Also, I'm thinking about relocating some of my squash and pumpkins to another area. So I may put some here, but I'm also thinking about putting some along just in the other parts of the garden to see how they do. As for our fruit trees, we learned a whole lot about pruning and also making sure that we have the right plants in the fruit guild for them. So for instance, we had we went to Eckert's Farm here. It's not in St. Louis, but it's in Illinois. We went to a place called Eckert's Farm, and over there we actually got to pick peaches and apples and blackberries. But it was awesome because we got to see like how full-fledged peach trees grow. Also, we learned too how close they're actually planted. And let me say that in nature, plants don't grow like 15, 20 feet apart in nature. Sometimes you have plants like bam, right next to each other. Going to Eckert's Farm showed that the distance that we planted our fruit trees, because that was a worry for me, they're actually going to do fine. I actually planted them a nice distance compared to the way they planted them. Now, sometimes I guess you could say that's kind of a hard comparison because they're more of a business and we're home, but I think it was good to learn from being there what we can and can't do. It also gave us an opportunity to really talk to the gardeners of the farm to see how they do things. So we came back home, took some notes, came back home, ate our peaches and our apples and our blackberries. And now we know what to do. And one of the things we're doing is pruning our trees. So we're learning how to dwarf them because they're really, really tall, and I don't want them to compete with the oak, I think, that's sitting here. But we end up pruning them, and we're cutting any of the cross branches that are crossing over each other that are kind of competing for space. And also from the plant garden, or the pollinator garden, whatever plants that I can't fit in the front, I'm bringing over to the fruit yield. So, and that leads to another point. I'm learning to actually really fill up your area before you dive off and do something else. Now, some of the plants that did really well over here was our nostratums. I hope I'm saying that right. And our Mexican sunflowers did really good. I believe that's called Mexican sunflowers. Or Mexican coneflowers. That's an annual. That's this plant right here in the back. This is an annual, but look at it. It went crazy in this spot. Like, it just grew almost as tall as my peach tree. So I'm definitely going to get some more of those next year, and that came from seed. I have some hydrangeas that I'm actually going to move into that area. Why am I moving the hydrangeas up here? One, it's going to add an element to the fruit yield because hydrangeas grow and they spread. So it's going to add more plants for the bees to come and to look at, and are just insects in general. Also, the reason why I'm moving my hydrangeas up here is because I'm learning about respecting plants' living conditions. So at first I put them around my patio because I figured it will create a nice beautiful border and they'll expand. However, my hydrangeas started drooping and started looking very sickly. And after doing research on it, I realized that they love morning sun, but they hate afternoon sun. So, and the spot that they're in is very sunny. So now they're starting to droop and get sick and lean over, and that's calling for me to move them to a partially shaded spot. And I figured back here would be very, very good for them. So I have about 6 of them. I'm moving from my border, and I'm going to bring them to the front. And what I'm going to put around the border is something that doesn't mind growing, like my obedient plants and my lamb's ears. They do very well in the sun. So I'm actually going to move them in those sections instead, so the hydrangeas can live and thrive back here. One of the other things that we plan on adding to our backyard farm is chickens. You don't see it right now. We don't really have the space for them. We don't really have the space set up for them. But it's definitely on the to-do list for purchasing. I wanted to do it this year, but I know it's recommended that before you get chickens, you really should make sure their home is ready. So hopefully this summer or this winter or fall, if we got any spare wood, we can kind of build a coop so that when it's time to get them, everything will be ready, they can move on in. Okay guys, so the final thing that I plan on adding to this yard and that we're going to work on before the winter hit is having a rainwater system. So as I mentioned earlier, we had experienced a crap load of thunderstorms. However, it helped our plants grow wonderfully. And some insects came, but hey, that's what comes with gardening. However, that really made us take into consideration of, wow, why not take that concept or take what we learned from that and actually invest in creating a rainwater system for our plants. So we end up buying a couple of totes for very cheap. And no, they're not, I've already checked, they're people friendly, they're not toxic, they're good. But we've got them for a really good deal. We got 2 of them. We're going to start with 2 of them. And we're going to attach them to our drains and collect rainwater the next season. So we have most of the pieces to put them together. So there may be a video coming out where I show you guys the process of us actually setting it up. So we got the big IBC totes, the big ones that are like 250 to 500 gallons. We got 2 of them on the side of the house on pallets. Our next step is to get to those and set those up. So that's the garden for today, you guys. This was a long video, so I hope I covered enough. I hope I shared as much. I hope you learned from our lessons learned. If you have not already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. So for those that are new, welcome to Cranberry Vintage. This is a place where we are like simple living, self-sufficiency, and sustainability. And that's not just us growing our own food, but that's also DIYing, home improvement, bettering ourselves. It is so much. And the style that's around it it's Afro-Bohemian. So yeah, we're going all the way. It's just a place where you learn house plants. Guys, okay. So I'm gonna have a video on a plant wall because I built a plant wall and I'm so freaking stoked about my plant wall. We're not gonna save it for this video. I'm not gonna show you. I'm not gonna show you. No. I'm not showing you. Wait until the next video. With that being said, you guys, it's time for me to go inside. You have an awesome day and stay super-tastic.